Oh, that was me causing trouble.
Okay, it looks like we are live. So welcome to this new book news reading, celebrating writers whose books were published during the pandemic lockdown. My name is Karen Schubert, and I'm the director of Lit Youngstown, a literary arts nonprofit in Northeast Ohio. We have programs for writers, readers, and storytellers, including the Fall Literary Festival this year on September 24th to 26th, as we're talking next this upcoming weekend, featuring these three fine readers. So we're so glad to have them, and more information is on lityoungstown.org. We were chatting before we went live about how much we miss being in the flesh, and it reminded me that there's this one bright light over my shoulder, and I've been trying to figure out how I could mute it a little bit, but then that just reminded me of the way the light changes in the gallery where we usually have our readings over the course of the year. There's just different light all the time, and so maybe that's a little bit reminding us. So whether you are watching live or as a recording, thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to feature these three writers and congratulate them on the publication of their new books. And we'll follow the readings with a brief conversation. Paula J. Lambert, recipient of 2 Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Awards and 2 Greater Columbus Arts Council grants, has authored several volumes of poetry, including The Sudden Seduction of Gravity and 3 special edition chapbooks. How to See the World, written when the pandemic began, was just released from Bottom Dog Press. Paula, welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to get right in to the poems, just dive right in, because I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have later. So, and I've changed my mind 100 times about what to read, but I do want to open with this called Breath. This is the book here, what it looks like. Breath. This is how the world has always lived, lonely and afraid. Each wave of terrible news, an intake of breath, sharp, a steel bright sword to our side. The long, slow, angry exhale prepares us for what bitter thing comes next. Sunrise, laughter, rain. Crocus, wise and delicate, blooms through death again and again. We can be that bursting. This is how the earth has always lived. This is what it is. Earth cracks open, we reach for light. Darkness comes, we reach for light once more. And this is Cloistered. I'm going to read it for my son, Christopher, who I hope is watching. Christopher and Christine. And if he's not, I think you'll see the recording later, but this is for Chris. My son in New York City says the sirens never stop. He's heard as many as 5 at once. Here in the suburbs of central Ohio, they're still few and far between. It's the lawnmowers that never end. We've not yet learned to let our grass grow wild. I lay on my back on my sun-drenched deck, marveling at how long it's taken me to ask how to love my neighbors when I do not always like them. One mower stops and another further away still roars. It stops and I can hear another. It's a gradual lessening. I count the continual distant hum all the way back to Brooklyn. I've not yet told Christopher about my cousin in Queens. Instead, I let these squawking birds pull me back to where I am right now, cloistered paradise. Christopher is a variant of Christ, aren't we all? My great aunts, cloistered nuns, must have had bad days, sad days. Abbey monks making all those sweet preserves must have pissed each other off plenty. We cultivate silence. I see so much better now. It's the chance to trace all we feel to its source, forward and back through every generation across space and time. And this squawking jay, thinking I'm too close, was sent to calm my monkey mind. There are better things to do, he says, than to dwell any place but here. There are 4 poems in the collection called How to See the World. And I'm going to read, this is the first one, How to See the World, Hunger. There's another, How to See the World, Thirst, another that's Fire, and another that's Breath. So How to See the World, Hunger. When I first moved from Massachusetts to Indiana, I didn't know how to see the flat black fields stretching all around me as anything but oceans of mud. It took time to understand the lay of that land, its change of season, and that newly turned soil as black as that held every promise of richness, newness, nourishment, food. I began to see it wasn't quite flat, that not all the soil was so dark, that every rise or mounding, every possible shade of brown was a different kind of soil, meant for a different kind of planting. But while it was still new to me, when I felt the first pangs of homesickness, a wanting that has never left, I sat down on the edge of one of those fields next to the man I knew by now I was destined to marry. I was destined to marry, still blessedly ignorant of what I would. It's funny what we trip up on. I sat down on the edge of one of those fields next to the man I knew by now I was destined to marry, still blessedly ignorant I was destined to divorce him, and gestured hopelessly across the landscape. There's nothing to see here, nothing to look at. The bleakness of what stretched around us matched only the bleakness of what was inside. To his credit, he didn't lash out or take my observation as insult. He said one of the few things I ever thought wise or helpful. I've been to the mountains, he said, and I also thought there was nothing to see. Those mountains were always in the way. And tension. This is one of 2 poems about tornado sirens. Here, I don't know where people are tuning in for. In Ohio, in the Midwest, of course, we have the weekly siren test signals. Here, they're every Wednesday. But sometimes they're not a test, right? That's why we have the weeklies. This is one of several poems in here that mention my granddaughter, and the whole book is dedicated to my granddaughter, Elizabeth. Tension. Today was not a test. When the sirens started wailing, I was so deep in focused concentration, I almost didn't notice. Not till I saw the light wasn't right or the time, and my brain broke through the task at hand, and I thought to ask what time it was, what day it was, and I still couldn't make sense how the county got things so wrong. The sirens cycled loud and then soft, loud and then soft, loud and then soft, till my heart picked up the rhythm thinking it would burst. Here, 3 minutes of siren are followed by 7 minutes of silence where you try to convince yourself danger has passed. What you just heard still rings in your ear, memory maybe, premonition. What you don't hear becomes what you pray for, something to tell you what to do. Stay still or run for your life. All that's left is to wait, tension building in a way that's hard to explain. Like the air itself knows something needs to break through somewhere. I hear the sky burst, rain, relief, and see a text from my daughter telling me baby's first tooth just broke through the gums. Christ, synchronicity. She's been teething for weeks, meltdown after meltdown, keeping everyone awake and begging for mercy. Mercy comes like a storm sometimes, prayers answered in ways we never would have asked. Trees uprooted, somebody's barn ripped to the ground, nobody killed this time. Next text is a photo of baby sleeping soundly. No way of knowing she'll suffer more storms than this one. No care in the world that another is already brewing. I miss my baby so much. I think I have time to squeeze in how I meant to set my timer. I think I'm going to squeeze this last one in. This is the last one in the book, and it's another How to See the World poem. This is How to See the World breath. And the epigraph is Thich Nhat Hanh. I know you are there, little anger, my old friend. Breathe. I am taking care of you now. It takes more than lungs to breathe. It takes head and neck and thoracic cavity. Can you feel the pelvis softly pivot? Wind is breath, air sweeping through the tops of trees and singing past the plains. So let's ask those who chart the jet stream, arborists and botanists, all the fire spotters, keeping watch from Parkland Towers, what it is that keeps us going, how it is we're all connected. Ask bluesman, jazz singer, every opera diva, ask any trumpet player how breath becomes our instrument. Ask bullet blasting through why it is that blood flows red. Ask the birds why every newborn baby pushed from the womb cries out. Every breath is a battle cry, refusing to retreat. See that brand new baby reaching for the light. See his tiny fist wanting to live. Source is not she who bore us. Source is she who feeds, she from whom all waters flow. Listen, bad smells tell us what we should all avoid. Good smells say, come closer. Sometimes one gives way to another. Remember the Titan arum? There's an earlier poem about the plant called the Titan arum, which is endangered and puts out a wildly awful smell when it's blooming. Remember the Titan arum, corpse plant, carrion flower? Even she smells sweet as pumpkin once her work is done. I'm prone myself to hyperventilation. My body swoons from too much breath too fast. I've learned to savor each inhale, to take things in and let them go. This is how we see the world. Fire, flood, famine. This is what it gives. Anger, tears, the taste for something more. Sit with these. It makes us stronger. Sit with these. It makes us wiser. Sit where you can't see how you still can. Feel the world fill your lungs. Hold it near your heart. Mother Earth has birthed us, newborn babies wailing. Let your breath go slowly, slowly. See how breath can move the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. What a delightful reading. Cathryn Essinger is the author of 4 books of poetry: A Desk in the Elephant House, My Dog Does Not Read Plato, What I Know About Innocence, and The Apricot and the Moon. Her poems have been featured on the Writer's Almanac and An American Life in Poetry. Please welcome Cathryn Essinger.
Can you hear me okay? Yes, that's fine. Self-promotion here. I will add that I have a new chapbook out, which Paula was kind enough to recommend for me. And the title of that is Wings, or Does the Caterpillar Dream of Flight? And it's a collection of poems about raising monarch butterflies, which is what consumes most of my summer. But this book has been a lot of fun. And I'm going to read the title poem and the first couple of poems that are in the book. The title poem, The Apricot and the Moon, is based on that old elementary school lesson where they line up three objects to explain how a small object can block out the view of a much larger object in the solar system. So this is The Apricot and the Moon, Solar Eclipse 2017. We set a grapefruit in the middle of the table, followed by an orange and an apricot. And then we set both to spinning to show how something small can eclipse the view of something much larger than itself. It all depends upon where you are standing. But now your father passes through to remind us that the table in the room should also be spinning at some rate still unknown even to astrophysicists, but we decide to ignore him. You hold the apricot up to your eye and say, now I can see only part of the window, and now I can't see the cat who has come to bed at the orange, or any part of the clock, which makes telling time a problem here at the edge of the galaxy where such things matter. And so you persist all evening, listing the things you cannot see, until I put you to bed, saying, now I can't see the moon and I can't see you. You fall asleep with the apricot on your pillow. I am afraid for you until I remember that you have an apricot to protect you from the things you do not want to see. And I wonder if you are right, if it is really that easy. So I get up and look at the moon and extend my hand until I cannot see that simple light. It was a good memory. The first poem in the book is called For the Birds, and it's an experience I had at the farmer's market. For the birds. At the farmer's market, the grocer has decided to give me a Bible lesson as I fumble for my wallet to purchase a squash. This one is called the Crown of Thorns, he says, to remind us of the cross. And here are 10 spokes, one for each of the commandments. I give the grocer his money, but my sympathy is with the squash, whose nature has been hijacked by religion. It fills my palm with its hefty promise, and I suspect it of knowing the true art of resurrection. Seeds packed into a sinewy cave where the pulp is so fragrant that time holds still. When I split the ovum with a knife, I reveal a space so private that I am embarrassed to have looked. Flesh as pale as the new moon, and an aroma so seminal that it stains all thought. With the sharp edge of a spoon, I scrape out the seeds, and holding the soft entrails in one hand, throw it all to the birds. This poem is titled Another Stilled Thing. I probably should have dedicated it to the little boy next door, but another stilled thing. Tangled in the roots of the sycamore tree, a goose egg, cold, spattered with mud, abandoned. I wash it in the creek, decide to carry it home for the neighbor boy who loves stilled things. Fossils, locust husks, and seashells. Anything that might have been, but now is not. But how oddly I walk with a cold egg in my hand. No sliding over hollow logs, no clumsy tumble down the creek bank before the dog and I wade to the other side. We honor its fragility as if it might be reawakened. It is, after all, an egg, once warm, some bird's blueprint for the future, now lodged in my hand. And if someone has to give the universe a kick to get things started, why not us? Why not now? Or is this grand silence, this question that no one cares to answer, nothing more than the egg that will not hatch? I'm changing my mind here. I think I'll read the poem Alas, because it kind of reminds me of Halloween and reminds me of my kids. Alas. Lying in bed at night, I think about my bones, the fringe of fingers and toes, the geography of tarsals, the elegant sweep of tibia. Fibula, like the legs of a Renaissance chair, the lace of vertebra, the airy rib cage, but at the skull I always stop, my own face unimaginable without its flesh. This is where I draw the line, the one image I refuse to let my children bring into the house, even in adolescent rebellion. No skulls, I said. Tattoos and rings, jewelry from the hardware store perhaps, but no skulls, as if I might stave off this alas poor Yorick moment. Tonight I tap around my eye sockets, feel for that lump on the back of my head that my mother said made me family. No dental records needed here, the coroner will say. Still, it is not my good bones that keep me awake at night, but the thought of them without me. Impersonal skull, please show me the blessings of anonymity, how to be unknown among the unknowable. Is there time for one more? Okay, this is All Hallows. It was cold here last night. There was frost on the neighbor's roof. So I'm beginning to think about Halloween. This is All Hallows. The inflatable ghost my neighbor has placed on his front lawn has already done his job. He startled me once in the moonlight, and now I am ready to be done with him. His wiggly fingers, his vinyl hide are no more frightening than a Sunoco sign. He's not like the spider that drops beside my ear or the ominous creak of an empty chair. But what do I know about the supernatural? Maybe plastic and glitter can be just as haunted as any Halloween cliche. And I do remember the young man who appeared on my doorstep one October evening, his grand cape floating behind him, lifting in an imperceptible breeze, and the little witch who appeared from nowhere. I mean nowhere. A small child dressed in black, unaccompanied on a moonlit night. Her confidence in our generosity so casual, so cheeky, that we gave her everything we had and we would have given more, except she left just as she came, unnamed, unannounced, her only protection, her naivete, and our reluctance to question her. By morning, the ghost will be nothing but a puddle, his plastic smirk buried in the grass, a sad reminder that everything can be deflated in the light of day. And now I regret having wished him ill. Who am I to prick the illusion, to name the shades that honor the night, especially here in November's first light, when suddenly everything seems holy, cold, and bare. Thank you.
Thank you so
That was
much.
fun.
Thank you very much. Our next reader is Kari Gunter-Seymour. Her poems appear in numerous journals and publications. She is the 2020 Ohio Poet of the Year and Poet Laureate of Ohio. Please welcome Kari Gunter-Seymour.
Hi, everybody. I come from a place so deep inside America, it can't be seen. White oaks thrash. Moonlight drifts the ceiling as if I'm underwater. Propane coils, warms my bones. Gone are the magics and songs, all the things our grandmothers buried. Piles of feathers and angel bones, inscribed by all who came before. When I was 12, my cousins called me ugly, enough to make it last. Tonight, a celebrity on Oprah imagines a future where features could be removed and replaced on a whim. A moth presses wings thin as paper against my window, more beautiful than I could ever be. Ryegrass raised seedy heads beyond the bull thistle and preen. Everything alive aches for more. So there are many characters in my little book here, but the two that are actually named are Ruby May and Fanny June. And so the next two poems will kind of introduce them and their personalities. And the first is Ruby May. My mama hates children and dogs, even her own. No matter that she makes this clear, announces it regular. Wherever she goes, there's a child or hound set to wallow her. as if she smells of jelly beans or Alpo. Manic, she will coo you penniless. Depressed, she'll peel the skin off your face with nary a whip of her curly head. Now she says, I wanted to live seemly. I set out to be kind. Reaches for her Bible. She says Uncle Bub used to tickle her up under her chin, and otherwise on whiskey nights. Says she and Fanny June would build forts with kitchen chairs and Grammy's starflower quilt, crawl deep inside, lure the cat with bologna, lie side by side, lock fingers in a pinky swear, hearts crossed, hoped he'd die. So if you decide to invest and read my entire collection, you will likely come to greatly admire Fanny June. She's quite a wonderful person, and she's actually made up of my grandmother Fanny, and my birthday's in June, so I kind of mixed up some characters there, so you get a little taste of what I am doing in this book, and this is called Perfect Pitch. I rode middle school bound in the back seat of Fanny June's station wagon, listening to her and her sister sing Jolene, trading verses, harmonizing on the chorus. I'm begging of you, please don't take my man. A few years later, it was 925. They were fired up, and it was Dolly's doing. This was rural Ohio, the bottom lip of northern Appalachia, right shy of Perry Como country. The women in the family worked the TS trim factory, spitting out Honda car parts. Started out on the assembly line, worked their way up to paint, then detailing, then welding. The physical labor made their bodies strong, their future bright, and like Dolly, they weren't taking any shit. They learned early on about strikes and picket lines, how important it was to organize and vote. Brave women in the workforce, determined to see their daughters inside college classrooms the hell out of Factory Row. I didn't know then that I was under the wing of a feminist taking back her power. Like Dolly, Fanny June would never use that word, no matter how much she embodied it. She was proud to hang up her welder's helmet end of shift, pick up her paycheck, sing in the front seat of a station wagon with women she loved. So as you can see, I come from a long line of strong, wily Appalachian women, and someday when we have more time, I will tell you more of those stories. And several of them are in this book, and it's kind of what this book is about, is several generations of strong, wily women and those men that interact with them over these years. But I can tell you that over time, we've lost a lot of our ways, our Appalachian ways. And many of us had grandmothers that still knew several of them, and we were just so silly, and the world made us feel so embarrassed about who we were that we gave up a bunch of those ways, and now we're trying really hard to get them back. But anyway, this one's called As the Twig is Bent, in honor of the grandmothers. Honeysuckle spiked early this year. The dogwood leaved by only half. My grandmother would say these are signs of consequence, the significance long lost to me, along with many mountain ways. My red-handled shovel offers up a smooth white pebble I place on my tongue, tasting of storm, of dusty teacups, a revelation between clenched teeth. Shoulders hunched, my body is a poem of rusty spine and thinning blood, words piled 100 apologies deep. Generations pass and still we toil, scratch at scars, lose track of the path home. A downy woodpecker probes a sculpted trunk. Clouds swell. The rain stings. So many of us are facing aging parents. This is a large part of the narrative in this book, and I'm hoping I can get through this poem. It's called Hold Fast. The meeting ends with a prayer. Hold fast, the hand next to you. Yesterday is a dream, every tomorrow a vision of hope. I squeeze the hands I hold, a woman on either side, one dressed in county jail orange. It's humbling. We are all struggling. My mother is perched and pillowed, dying. Her mind a highway of eroding neural paths. She tells me intimate stories without knowing who I am. Dramas whispering themselves into her ears, a roadmap of saga left to me to sort. The woman on my right notices the scar in my palm, caught on a piece of barbed wire when I hopped a fence with Mark Foudy sophomore year, somewhere near Torch, Ohio. He took me skydiving, made his own beer, gave me an engagement ring the summer of '78. Tempting, but as my mom pointed out, I was just beginning my life. My mother didn't have choices, having fled farm and family. My daddy, fresh from the war, metalled and wired, a great catch. Both of them so broken. On my 16th birthday, I told her, I hate you. Now she says she hates to leave me. Thomas Merton wrote, if the world were to end tomorrow, I would still plant a tree today. I leave the meeting, drink black coffee from a plastic mug, listen to the in-betweens my mother spins, and trace the ruthless shadows of December's moon. So my last poem is, I think, probably best described as a series of reflections that kind of went through my head when I wrote the poem and standing in my garden, and it's called The Weeds in This Garden. Long ago, I built a self outside myself. I ate what my family ate, answered to my name. But when they said, let us pray, I kept my eyes open. There is a price to be paid for resistance. Whatever you call me, I have called myself worse. Invented words made up of letters from my own name. Now the backs of my hands, all bone and strain, I think cannot be mine. Who hasn't killed herself at least once only to grow into someone needier? Who hasn't bent with her wounds to a mutinous patch, weeds shooting up like false rhubarb, every wisp, stem, and sodden pith a testament? Who hasn't scratched at the question of what it means to be here? Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Kathy. Is this not the dream experience to be with you two women who I've loved and admired, and Karen, you as well, is just a huge bucket list thing. So thank you all so much for having me in tonight.
Thank you so much, Kari.
Wonderful.
I think that was just a wonderful reading, and I love how you and I, the three of us, the four of us, have exchanged messages about how these three covers are in conversation, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So, Paula, will you kick us off?
Sure. I want to thank you, Karen, for bringing us together and for scheduling us together, because when I saw who I was going to be reading with, I just could not have been more thrilled. I love these women and I love their work. I really, really respect their work. And both of these books are just,
God bless.
I love the feel of a brand new book. Of course, it's so nice when they come in the mail these days, because we're not getting them at the readings anymore, right? But mine are also already starting to get frayed, because I've read both of these cover to cover already. I had prepared two sets of questions. One sort of about the general world of the poems, I think, and then more technical. So I'm going to combine the first set so that either Kari or Kathy can address, however, maybe it'll be more conversational. And I had talked to Kathy yesterday about what I thought I might ask her and make sure she was comfortable with it. But I want to say too, it's so great to read with women, and especially in the events of the last couple of days, losing who we've lost publicly. It's such a comfort to be in the company of really smart and brave and beautiful.
I just want to interject really quickly that I just was scheduling the readings as the readers came in, so it was completely but
well, this is lovely coincidence and karma here, I think. So I was thrilled. One of the things the first thing maybe that occurred to me, honestly, even before I knew we were doing this with Kathy's poems, was thinking how marvelous they were to whether these poems could have been written at any other stage of life. I think the fact that we've survived this world so long, all of us are grandmothers. I do think I have come to learn the older I get that there is some wisdom that does come with age. And so I look forward to my older self who will maybe help me figure out where I am now. So I wondered if Kathy might address that, because her collection does mention children and grandchildren, I think. And with Kari's book, I think there's something similar. It was because it's so much more about a more sort of gritty kind of survival. And I earnestly believe to get where we are today, an important part of that and get here healthy is to look, just kind of stare down the dark places and the shadows. It's a difficult thing, but a necessary thing. And it's what I admire most, Kari, about this collection. I don't like to toss out the word brave, but it is. And it's a wonderful thing to be an example of how we can look at the dark places and the shadows and the trauma that becomes generational trauma if we don't look at it. So I'll shut up now, and if either one of you want to respond in any way, that would be great.
I'll respond to that simply because I hadn't really occurred to me that we were all grandmothers, but we are, and I do think it makes a difference in your life in some respect. And I was explaining to Paula a while back that I feel more settled in my work than I have in a long time. And I think that comes with age. I feel like there's a permission to take chances that I might not have taken when I was younger, simply because who cares? You have this world of poetry behind you. You have poetry friends. You know that people are tolerant of you experimenting with things. And that's one thing that I've learned being in a writer's group, that it's very nice to be able to experiment with people. But this particular book, The Apricot and the Moon, was so slow coming because I had published 3 books and I really had no inclination whatsoever to publish another one, but I was still writing poems. And then my brother and I moved in with our parents to take care of them in their old age. We were there for 3 years. We had thought maybe 6 months, but we were there for 3 years. And I was still writing poems, and I thought it was a good time to start submitting poems because I have that kind of time on my hands, and I did. And then all of a sudden you have these poems that are out there and you think, okay, maybe they are a book after all. And so they kind of formed themselves into a book, and I accepted that. And now it feels very different. I like all of my books, but this one seems like it's more like where I am at the moment. And I would like to ask Kari that question, because I was very aware when I was reading her work, I really wanted to know who Fanny June was. I kept trying to figure that out. You know, is this an aunt? Is this a grandmother? So I'm glad that you explained. And such admirable women that you've obviously known over time.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what the question still is. Is it,
I'm sorry.
could I have written this book if I were a younger person? Because, okay, so in answering that, I've only been writing for less than 10 years. So no, no, but I also agree with you, Kathy. I think that this book for me, like you said, I think this might be my last book. I mean, it very well could be, but I had these burning stories, and sometimes I think I am a storyteller that uses less words. Because you know, Appalachians are known for their storytelling, but I think the stories that are, or the pieces that I wrote are really from a mature woman. I don't think the voice ever is of a younger woman. It's of an older woman looking back and or forward or somewhere in between. So to answer that part, yes. And yes, I have been so blessed to have so many amazing, wonderful women enter my life. Sometime we have to have that conversation, because you really won't believe it. I have been so blessed.
That's true.
And you have that lovely dedication to your book too, Kari, which is so marvelous. To every woman in my life who has befriended, loved, and looked after me, I hold you dear. Oh, it's just beautiful.
Do. Y'all are gonna have me crying before the night's over. Because it's so true. Is it not? Is it not? All of you. Look, I mean, how is it that we all have met each other and could have such complete passion and compassion for each other and want to lift each other up and just have true, deep feelings for each other, you know? In lots of fields of work, we'd be in competition with each other. We'd be scrambling for whatever, and we just don't do that, you know. Maybe there's something wrong with us, I don't know, but
or something right, maybe.
Something right, yes.
That has something to do with age as well. I feel a lot more supportive of younger writers than I ever have in my life. You think, oh, you know, honey, please keep trying. And just, you feel more comfortable with what you're doing and more appreciative of what other people have accomplished. Just amazing work. Can I ask Kari a question about how she arranged her book? Because I kept reading it and I kept thinking, you know, these aren't exactly narratives. They're more like impressions. And I think it's a wonderful example of how imagery can tell a story. And like the image of your mother in the patched cotton dress, I think that's just lovely. And you with fists in your pockets. That's interesting. But I realized by the time I got to the end of the book that it was a narrative, even though I wasn't reading the poems that way as I came to each section. Is that an accurate observation?
Very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Very much so, Kathy, because like I said, honest to gosh, I'm a storyteller. I just happen to be writing them in poetry form. But yes, I think that's sometimes why I have trouble getting the kind of attention that others get, because of my style of writing, you know, because I am very Appalachian. I use Appalachian words. I use, you know, things that maybe only happen in Appalachia. And I think you hear that dialect throughout, even though it's not dropping the G's. You know what I mean? It's not, I'm not putting in words that say fishing and going and, you know, poosh and boosh or anything like that, but I still think you can hear the dialect, and it's very much sense of place. And so for me, I was just telling that story about my life and other women in my life, and especially in my family. And there seemed to be a chronological order to that for me. And it was sort of a layering. I was thinking of layering because, you know, I talk about the dog a couple times in section 1, and then again in section 2, and then in section 1 we meet the mother, but then in section 2 we learn that we've, you know, grown to love the mother and understand the mother, and we weep at the mother's death, you know, at the end, oh mama, can you picture it? Me on my knees, the moon in a mad orange flare, you know, because finally, aren't we all looking for that moment of just pure clarity when it finally makes sense? And
Yes. Yes,
sorry, yeah, I'm talking too much, but we all want to settle these things before we lose our loved ones, right?
yes.
We all want to settle these things. And strangely, I wrote all these poems before my mother's death. I don't know why, but I did. So it made her death easier to bear.
I just thought it was fascinating the way each poem created imagery. I mean, the poems advance through imagery, and yet there is a narrative thread coming through there the entire time, but I didn't quite realize it until I was well into the second section, which I thought was pretty nifty.
I want to say too, Kari, if I may, that as much as your beautiful work is grounded in place, and they are Appalachian poems, I think you said something about maybe this couldn't happen anywhere other than Appalachia. I think that's misguided, because what's so beautiful about your work, you know, whether it's the grinding poverty, whether it's the, you know, just working so hard to get by, whether it's the nature, the beauty of flowers and trees and things, whether it's abuse of women, whether it's just whatever it is, it's absolutely universal. And I don't think anyone should be, you know, misguided by that these are somehow just, whatever that would mean, just Appalachian poems. I think they're absolutely universal and so beautiful.
Well, thank you. And you're right to call me out on that. You're absolutely right. My bad. My bad. And if I could be allowed to ask you, Paula, I had a question for you, because I felt, you know, you are always such a deeply emotional writer. I love that about you. And you spend a great deal of time sort of working yourself into the minds of insects and birds and, you know, vertebrae and humans. And this last book, I know you wrote rather quickly and under pandemic pressure. And so my question to you is, do you feel like it provided healing for you in any way to write this book? Because I'm assuming that it did, but I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. My field for a long time was writing as a healing process, writing toward wellness. So I've been mired deep in this work for a long time, and it's how I make my way through the world. It just is, staring into those dark places, staring things down, because what we're most afraid of, I think, and most hurt by sometimes is what we can most learn from, right? And with the caveat that if we're writing through, you know, deep trauma, which who isn't right now, but it's best to do that not just on your own, but, you know, with a therapist, with a guide of some kind. But yeah, you mentioned you wrote, and I had to, part of the reason I kept changing my mind about what to read is I'm a little on the weepy side today, I think, just because I'm a bit overtired. And there were some poems that I just couldn't read. You mentioned you wrote these before your mom had passed, is that correct?
Yes.
And I wrote these just after my dad passed. And the first half of 2019 was gangbusters for me. I was on book tours and traveling and got to do so much. I went to New Mexico, I went to New Orleans and Mississippi, and it was wonderful, and everything came to sort of a grinding halt last summer when our granddaughter was born prematurely, 5 weeks premature. And then there was just one health crisis after another through my family. I was on the road constantly and always under crisis. And it culminated with my dad passing away suddenly in December. And then still traveling to be with my mom afterwards. And, you know, being in Boston and watching the news and about the airports and what was already coming in. This pandemic was no surprise to me. I was so ready to hunker down. I was exhausted. I was grieving. I needed that time to process. And so that, I think, is what I mean, clearly things are terrible. We lost family members. We lost, you know, close friends. We're all traumatized right now. But I was, at the same time, we can talk about nuance, right? Having more than one feeling at the same time. I was so deeply grateful to have the time and space to just do nothing but grieve and process and write. So as much as this has been a horrible thing, it's been a bit of a gift. No, it's been a gift for me to process. I think there's a lot of missed opportunity here. I think it could have been and should have been, could be and can be for a lot of us a chance to process and grieve and heal. And I don't know why we're in this country so resistant to that. So
that's a really good observation. I have enjoyed just cutting things off because things were so frantic before we had to lock down. And being something of an introvert anyway, it seemed like a good idea. I'm getting a little tired of it, but I always wanted to tell Paula that I kind of watched, I think, some of these poems appear in April on Facebook and other places.
I post, there's a few in the book that were not on Facebook, but I was posting these every day intentionally, which under normal circumstances we wouldn't do, right? You don't put out your work before, you know, it's published somewhere. But I was absolutely, I believe artists help us all process. So I was very intentionally posting them every day, which is kind of scary. And Kathy commented quite often and was a big help getting me through this.
I thought it was an incredibly brave thing to do and very appropriate for April. It was National Poetry Month, and here came a poem from Paula every day. It seemed expected, and I enjoyed it. And I just know that I personally would not be able to do that. I walk around things and stew too much to do that, and I'm too slow a writer. So I really admired that kind of momentum that you picked up, how one poem kind of generated another.
Yeah,
that's the way it felt anyway.
Kathy,
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on the comment that you made about that you like to stew on things and think a lot, because one of the things that I love about your work is all the science that's in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and I know you probably get this all the time, but I really want to know more. I even wrote down some things that just blew me away. Like facts, like the poem that you read, and you're talking about skulls and all of that, but also lying in bed at night, I think about my bones, and then you start naming them all, and I was thinking, I don't remember any of that. I know we had to learn that somewhere, you know, in my undergrad, or maybe a little bit in my graduate, but anyway, and then the For the Birds, that beautiful comparison of the cavity of the squash to the ovum.
Yes.
And then, I mean, talk about visceral and visual and oh my gosh, I mean, your work I am just totally a fan, as you can tell.
Thank you.
But anyway, I just thought maybe you could talk a little bit about your science background or the passion for science that you bring, because I always feel like I literally learn things from your poems.
Yeah. I'm an English major.
Oh.
I'm an English major through and through, but I've always thought that maybe I missed my calling, that I should have been a science writer, because I have always enjoyed the writers who make science very accessible. And trust me, I'm a very lightweight scientist, but I do like poems where you learn something
Yes.
and you think, oh, that's a fact that's going to stick with me. And the things I have learned reading poems have just kind of blown me away. In fact, I got to tell Ron Rollins the other day. Are you familiar with Ron Rollins? He's a local artist and poet, and he has a poem out that about, oh dear, about suffocating a rabbit that had been hit on the road. And he was trying to think how to put this rabbit out of its misery very quickly. And a very similar thing happened to me with my dog out in the backyard. And I am literally Googling, how do you do in a small rabbit? And all of the things that they suggest online were just much too violent for what I knew I was going to have to happen here. And thank heavens the rabbit died before I could do it. But then I remembered Ron Rollins' poem and I thought, damn, if Ron can do it, I can too. And I took a plastic bag and went out to accomplish that and said, and thank heavens the little rabbit was gone. But I thought, how do you explain to Ron that I learned how to do that from his poem? And I do like science. I do like factual things. It's like some key that kind of helps you understand a universe that's really mysterious. And said Paula wrote a lovely blurb for my chapbook about raising monarchs. She knows how deep I can get into it.
I was going to actually mention that if we could squeeze that in, because that book is so beautiful, and it is brand new, and it's the quintessential collection, I think I said in my blurb, and absolutely sincerely, because I learned so much reading that. And I think this is another thing we don't do well enough, is we tend to separate math and science from English and the humanities, and that's just so wrong. My dad was a chemistry teacher. I hated math and science. I never thought I was good at it, which might be part of growing up, female, right? We weren't really strongly encouraged in those areas. But that collection, even more, Kari, than this one, the monarch butterflies, the science and the poetry, and the humanities allows us, the poets, the writers, the humanities, it gives voice to what science can maybe only explain technically, right? So we, to combine those two things is a beautiful and necessary thing, I think. And Kathy, you do it beautifully, Kari. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to show off that cover.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, that will be our next. And I have to tell you, I had to look up, I'm going to have to look it up again. I had to look up Crown of Thorns squash, because I did not know what it was. And then when I saw it, I was like, well, of course that's the one. Of course that's the Crown of Thorn. But I love that. I love when I'm challenged in that way. And I don't think I've ever read a poem of yours that I didn't come away feeling that way. Like you had really taught me something, and I felt like, wow, this is just amazing. So thank you.
I think I should throw in that I have a twin brother who is a mathematician. He is a pure computer person. And I used to think that we were very, very different, but I had this privilege that I never thought I would have of going back to my family home and spending 3 years with my brother. I mean, sleeping in the room I had as a child. And we used to knock on the walls and ask each other, when is the chemistry exam due and things like that. That nowadays, in our old age, we would knock on the walls and say, hey, what are the numbers for glaucoma? I was at the time. But I thought we were very, very different. And actually we are not. Math is just another science and just another language.
Yes.
And that's something that has come more true for me as we've gotten older. Can I ask Paula something about coincidence? Because I love, in one of her poems, she said so confidently, of course, coincidence is real, which I think is really tantalizing and fun. And when I got to looking at her poems, there are so many things that are just juxtapositioned against each other. The sleeping baby, the tooth, the tornado sirens, all of that, and which is and isn't coincidence in many ways. Yes. Okay. My husband is passing me a note asking me if the dog has eaten. Important things, you know. So is coincidence, luck, fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. I think that works very well in your poems. You feel like everything comes naturally. Of course, the baby is teething while the tornado siren is going off. And I do think that's kind of amazing. I don't know if that's a question or not, but I really liked it a lot.
Well, I think at least some part of that is mindfulness, right? And paying attention. And I think that, you know, some things might be coincidence, but an awful lot is just the strands that are there that are absolutely woven together, that the more we pay attention, the more we see that they are. There's another poem, I hope I can say, get through saying this. I couldn't read the poem tonight, but another, you know, you guys know that I've been writing about birds for years, and the science of birds, the anatomy of birds, and the bones and beaks and feathers, and bird, and there are some bird poems in this book. And when I was so traumatized by ventilators this spring, all the news about ventilators, because my dad had passed on a vent, and it was sudden, and it was supposed to be temporary, and it was horrible. And when that was in the news constantly, it was very horrible and triggering. And I did what I tend to do, which is turn into it instead of away. And I started researching ventilators and found the man who invented the most commonly used one that's out there. His name is Forrest Bird. I mean, what is that? What is that? So, you know, I don't think they're all always coincidences. I think they're out there if we pay attention and let ourselves be guided. There's strands that just fit together really, really beautifully. I think there's a lot more there of that than we might otherwise be willing to think or expect if we just pay attention.
That's a beautiful place for us to end tonight. So I just want to thank you so much. I would love to keep this conversation going forever. Thank you again, and I wish you all well. And congratulations on these amazing books. So I'll be sure to drop links in all of our media.
Thank you
So much, Karen.
Big poetry hugs to everybody.
Yes.
That too.